Hey guys, my name's Terry and I'm a collectibles dealer. I specialize in high-end collections. I'm a big fan of music, but I'm not an expert. That's why we've got Johnny D.
Check this out. This is the original turntable cut creator, Grandmaster Flash. And you're checking out my man Johnny D on the 1 and 2. Woo!
Okay.
Here we go. Our first major podcast.
What Tales from the Vault with Johnny D.
Johnny D. Yes, I'm very excited.
Well, why don't you go ahead and start, Johnny?
Okay, my name is John DeMiro. I'm known as Johnny D. I've been in the music business for a very long time, been a crazy record collector for over 50 years. I started my own record label back in 1994 called Henry Street Music. I worked at Atlantic Records in Warner for over 15 years. And I currently have a radio station called the Johnny D Experience, which is on 24 hours a day. And I published 2 books, which I'll talk about later, and a third one is on its way.
Great.
And you are?
Yeah, I'm Terry and I'm a professional collectibles and memorabilia dealer. I've been doing it my whole life, and I met Johnny through just browsing online and saw this record that I've been collecting. It's a test pressing of Rapper's Delight by Sugar Hill Gang, 1979, and I've been collecting that record, as many copies as I could find, for the past 10 years or so. And they're getting harder and harder to find because, there are probably 10 or less of them made. So every time I find one, I get really excited. And I saw one on Johnny's post, and I just reached out to him. And Johnny, what did you think when I reached out to you about that?
Yeah, it was funny because for years, I've had like the largest test pressing and acetate collection in the world, and I have unbelievable respect and love from all the record collectors and DJs and people in the know. But I've always felt, it's funny that you have to explain what these things are. So to most people in the world, they're not really familiar with a test pressing and an acetate. So a couple of months ago, I said, rather than me just have people that I know that are on my Instagram or whatever, I said, let me do an actual YouTube page and just start displaying some of these things. And I've gotten, traction and different people reaching out, some, obviously when you see a Pink Floyd and some crazy Michael Jackson and Prince stuff. The irony is that, Terry reaches out to me about, and it's not that I dismissed this particular item, but of all of the stuff that I've put on these pages, I think I just kind of was like, oh yeah, there's a Sugar Hill Gang. So, and I have nothing but respect for the whole Sugar Hill, Joey Robinson, Sylvia, the whole thing. I just think it's funny that was how we actually linked, because most people would come at me with, how do you have a Pink Floyd, another brick on the wall acetate? So he was like, he sent me an email, and I instantly thought it was like someone from Japan, because you get a lot of people. The Japanese are very in the know with stuff, and very collectible, and they're very in love with pop culture in America. And he was like, yeah, my name is Terry. So I'm like, all right, I'm thinking this is another one of these, which is, I wasn't being dismissive, but I figured it was going to be another person telling me. And the thing that killed me about it was, because I'm going to send, I also, I collect them into, posters and, flyers. So then, the antenna went off, because I'm very in the know of how rare that stuff is. I personally don't really have any of it, but I know about it. So when he mentioned that, I was like, oh, wow. So he sent me a link, and I'm scrolling. I'm like, wow, that's like really cool. And I know there's a value. I have a lot of friends of mine that are into that world. And then as I'm scrolling, I see an acetate of Kurtis Below Christmas Rappin. Now, the reason that caught my eye for a couple of reasons. The first of all, I had never seen that before. And at that point, I knew, I'm like, this is a real deal. I mean, I knew he was a real deal from the posters, but when you get into the record world, I guess I'm a little bit snobbish, because everybody thinks that, oh, I have Elvis records from the 50s. I'm a millionaire. Like, they have no idea that That's not the case. So when I saw that Christmas Rappin, it was well, two things happened when I did it. I happen to have an acetate of the brakes, which is arguably one of the most collectible
Jealous.
items, which we'll discuss later on. But the Christmas Rappin was a crazy one for me because the brakes was actually pressed, it was through the actual major label structure. So it was the acetate was made at an actual mastering lab from an engineer. The Christmas wrapping was done at Sunshine Sounds. Now, just to give people a little this, whole little story on Sunshine Sound. Sunshine Sound was this great place on 1650 Broadway. I remember the last time I was there, Tony Orlando was in was in the lobby. He was actually doing some kind of a documentary, and people were asking, I guess he was signed to Bell and Bell Records at one point, which was a Clive Davis was actually in that building. There were a lot of record labels in that building. But Sunshine Sound, I was at a party one time, this DJ was there, and he was playing this 10-inch disc. Now, a 10-inch disc in itself was an odd thing because most people were playing, especially in the DJ world, it was a 12-inch thing or 45s on a 7-inch. So I saw this 10-inch disc, and there was this sun that was on the label. I'm like, that's a little bit strange. And I'm listening to the version of this record, and it's a totally re-edited, and back in 1980, this is iconic to have somebody editing records. So I go up to the guy. I said, "Could you show me that, record?" And he showed it to me, and I was instantly. I just looked right. I saw 1650 Pro. I was like, "I don't even know what this is. I'm going there." So I went. I got on the train. I got to the place. I go, and it's an office building. I'm like, it's like. So I look on the, and I'm looking. I'm expecting this. I have no idea at this point. I'm DJing a year. It's 1980, whatever, 81, and I get off the elevator. It's like you're in a doctor's office. I go on the door, you ring the bells. Guy comes over, very nice, neat. Hi, my name is Frank. The guy Frank. I mean, you would never in a million years think that this guy's involved with music in any way, any capacity. And he walks over to me. I says, Frank, I heard somebody playing. He goes, oh yeah, I have, sit down over here. It was the most bizarre thing. If it existed today, it would probably be a multi-billion-dollar company. So you sat down and he had this book and you'd go through it and he listed number one, Love Deluxe. Here comes that sound again, remix. Number two, Pull Up to the Bumper, Grace Jones, WBLS. I'm like, so he was getting reel to reel or even cassette tapes from popular DJs at that time, and he would make these discs for sale, but only people in the know knew about this. So it was like this secret society. It was like almost like some underground thing, but it wasn't, but it was. So it was a very crazy thing. So I went there. I don't know, $20. It was $10 a piece. He goes, I said, I like to have Hollywood One and Love Deluxe. He said, okay, take, and it's a real time process. And what he does is he puts up the tape. He gets this 10-inch acetate, puts it down, and he cuts it right in front of you. It's crazy. So cuts it, and the acetates have this beautiful smell, which I love. Anyway, so he gives you the record, you leave with it, you go home, you play them. And so now you have this disc right there. At that time, and for years, I only thought he dealt with a bootleg type of a thing. Fast forward a couple of years in my crazy travels of acetates and test pressings, I come across two acetates with the Sunshine Sound label. And I'm like, are these different versions? And I listened to them, the exact versions, but I noticed on those there were actual credits. And when I looked at Terry's acetate of Christmas Rappin', it showed writer's credit. So I knew, wow, this was an option for the record companies in addition to people who just wanted to press things. And that's how I knew it was legit. If it didn't have the writer's credits typed under it, I would have easily dismissed it and said, oh, somebody did some bullshit version of Christmas Rappin' and they pressed it at Sunshine Sound. But because of those credits, that's how I knew it was legit, because I have 3 or 4 of them the same exact way. So in short, what happens is there was the breaks, which I was talking about, which goes through the major label structure, which is a much more expensive process because you're paying for an engineer and you're paying for the lacquer and everything else. This particular one is, you know what? We need this real fast. Maybe we're bringing it to WBLS at Frankie Crocker at the time. Do me a quick reference because the engineer is booked for the next 3 days. We need this right now. And that was what Frank and Sunshine Sound could facilitate. So anyway, so that was the thing that connected Terry and myself. And we've been going pretty hard since we met, and I'm very happy, and I think we're in the process of doing some really big things.
So, Johnny, I have a couple questions for you. You mentioned acetates and test pressings, and how would you explain it to the audience who may not know what those are? How would you describe an acetate and a test press?
Okay, so an acetate is a very, very rare recording, and it's usually done from the master tape, and it's a reference disc. So most of the times when an acetate is made, it's either for the artist if they want to listen to what they just recorded, or the producer, or sometimes the engineer before they're actually getting ready to make the record. They use it as a reference disc. So it's that was the main reason for an acetate. Then as time went on, more like in the radio side in the 70s and 80s, it became we need to get this to a radio station really fast, and we're not going to have time to wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month to get the record pressed. So let's bring this to the radio station as a reference disc. So they've always been extremely rare. They usually come in like one, three, or five copies. You rarely see a company make over five for a couple of reasons. First of all, they were very expensive. Even like in the latter days, it's an expensive process because the actual acetate itself is expensive. The engineer is taking his time, and he's getting paid an hourly wage to produce this thing. So it takes time to play the tape once, play it again, play it back. So it's actually a very expensive situation. So not every record has an acetate. As far as the numbers, those are determined. It's there is no rhyme or reason. I was at a record company for over 15 years in the major label structure. I'd make them, I wouldn't make them. I would use a certain mastering lab. One guy was my friend. Do me a favor, have this guy cut it. There really is most of the time record companies are in bed, so to say, with certain people. So, okay, this is my engineer, this is his mastering facility. That's where they go. So when you look at a lot of artists, there's some continuity. Michael Jackson, a lot of his stuff was a Bernie Grudman West Coast thing. A lot of the dance disco stuff that happened in New York to Ray Caviano, which we'll discuss in depth at a later episode, his stuff was all New York. Frankfurt Wayne, which was the Gamble and Huff, the Philadelphia International iconic sound, those were all done at Frankfurt Wayne. Every Philadelphia International record, and I have Penny Gamble's collection. So almost all of them were Frankfurt Wayne. They were all done there. So that's an acetate, and they're extremely rare. One of the misconceptions is people say they only could be played so many times. That's false. You can play these things forever, but it's all about being smart. If you take care of it, it's going to be okay. So, you don't run needles all over it. You don't go crazy. You don't try to scratch with them. You don't manipulate it. You just put the thing, you can get crazy use. I've never seen one, you know, stop working. There is a thing called burn on a record, and a lot of DJs, when they're playing, if they cut records up, you'll hear a shh before they do it. If a certain record, especially in the hip hop community, if they would get a certain record that they played a lot, you'll hear that shh before it comes in. You can get that, but you can get that on regular records, a regular vinyl press stylene. They were actually a poor pressing, and those would get those on a regular record. So there's nothing different with the acetate thing in that way. You really can't clean them. That's kind of a crazy thing because I'm one of those people that keeps my records immaculate, and usually I use some kind of an alcohol or whatever. You really can't put anything on top of these things because it is metal with acetone sprayed on top of it. So if you were to chip off, and there are some that chip and stuff, it's metal, it's silver metal underneath it. It's, aluminum. So that's that. So as far as a test pressing, so the test pressing is the next best thing, but a more durable copy. So the acetate is very heavy. One more thing I want to say about the acetates, and this is another thing I like to clear up, and Terry and I discussed this in depth. You'll see an acetate, a 10-inch acetate, 12-inch acetate, double-sided acetate, two different discs acetate, whatever. Most of the time, there is nothing planned about that. There is a time constraint on them. So you can only go so on a 10-inch acetate, I think you can only go up to 10 minutes. On a 7-inch record, they tell you really shouldn't go past 7 minutes, but most 7 inches are 4 minutes or under. And radio versions for years were under 4 minutes, even to this day. When you make a record in the studio, you need a 4-minute version, or else radio station won't even think about it. Which I always think about something like Elton John, where he was like, I don't give a shit. Here's Someone Saved My Life tonight, 7 minutes. Play it or don't play it. He didn't. I love that. So there were all those, Stairway to Heaven, 7:45. There was a 7-inch of that, and they did the whole seven. And it was promo only, but they really didn't care if radio stations played it on that. So on the acetate, you'll go to a thing, hey, I need this album done. And the guy will say, wow, all I have is two separate discs. I ran out of my double-sided. If you need it, you're gonna just tell them, just run them. I have every configuration, 7s, 10-inch, 12. I even have 8-inch discs, which is an odd one you'll see once in a while. Double-sided, single-sided. So that's that. I cleared that up. Test pressing wise, so the next step when you're making a record is the test pressing. Also, you do not need to make test pressings. These are not, people think, oh, everything's an acetate, everything's a test pressing. Not the case. Yeah, on my own label, I've put out hundreds of records on Henry Street. I don't have test pressing. Well, I had quality control test pressings of everything on the label. So there are at least 3 quality control of everything on my label. Then I would do a run of 99, which are test pressings, but it's kind of like a promo run of the test pressing label. So that was about the DJs feeling special. A lot of the time they're used for internet. When you do a bigger run, and it's the same thing like the acetate, you could do 1, 3, 5, 25, or like 99. That was usually how it went. When you would see a test pressing label and it's typewritten, most of the time there's a minimum of 300 made. Now, they're rare in a sense, but to me, I kind of dismissed a lot of those because it is to me more of a promo run than a test pressing run.
But just to jump in and distinguish one thing, I mean, some of them are typewritten, but they're manually typed on the label.
Okay, so I will say, okay, so what I meant was manually type, but most of the manually typewritten labels were more on the acetate. That's totally different. On the test pressing, they're either handwritten, they're really all basically all handwritten. Anytime you see a type label on a test pressing, they didn't type those, because a test pressing is an acetate is affixed right now. I could be sitting here and I'll get a record and I'll get the sticker. They would literally they would get the stickers. Sunshine Sound was a perfect place to see this. They would have 8 stickers on a piece of, a regular sheet. Yes, okay. So they would have that sticker. So now obviously he had the Sunshine Sound blank labels. So he'd have that. It says Sunshine Sound, no other credits. He would get it, roll it in his typewriter, type in Kurtis Blow 33 and a third, all that information. He would do that. So acetates are typed off of the sheet of the sticker. That's how those are done.
Just so everyone knows, this is that I'm holding up is the acetate of Christmas Rappin' by Kurtis Blow, put out in 1979, the first rap record on a major label. And this is one of 2 that were made. And when I showed this to Johnny D the first time, he said it's a typed label, but it's actually manually typed on the label.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I'm talking about manually typed. When you see type on a test pressing, it's not manually typed because you can't put a test pressing label with your hand.
Yes.
Those are made through the actual stamping process when they're making the records.
Yes.
So what happens is, and I'm going to get back to the Kurtis, but just to finish the explanation on the test pressing. So on the test pressing labels, those are made the same way the promotional labels made and the regular labels made. So the process is the acetate, you don't need to do an acetate, but if they do, and then you do a test pressing, don't need to do a test pressing, but then you do a promo copy. Also, you don't need to do a promo copy, but most companies did, and then you did the commercial copy.
In some of the cases, there were only 1 to 3 to 5 to 10 test pressings made. They didn't do a whole run.
Absolutely. And on the crazy rare records, like a perfect example is like Michael Jackson Thriller. You know, I've seen two acetates in my life of that. Um, Extremely rare. Never seen a test pressing of it. Now, so they went from acetate, which was probably for Quincy Jones, Michael, and maybe an international thing. Then they went straight to press. Now, the first press of the Thriller album, if you look at the back of it, it'll have a gold promo stamp on it. That's how you know it was the first run. And also in the credits, it doesn't list Michael Jackson as a producer. Michael went crazy. They had to redo the jackets, and it says produced by Quincy Jones, co-produced by Michael Jackson. So in the second press and so on, they all have Michael Jackson as a producer. But the first promo jacket, which for somebody who's really crazy, they'd want to have that one, has the promo stamp in the back. And most of the stuff through Columbia Epic, that whole Sony, before it was Sony, was Columbia Epic, that whole world, they wouldn't do promo albums. Even like when Def Jam was part of them, like the Beastie Boys. The Beastie Boys promo album didn't say promo on the Def Jam label. It would have the gold stamp in the back. That was how the LL Cool J, all of those, Third Base, Slick Rick, all those albums in the hip hop world. But even on the regular pop, Luther Vandross, Never Too Much. I have the only test pressing I've ever seen of that. And that test pressing, it's like has little on the top left hand side, it has this handwritten catalog number. So they went from test pressing to press. That was it. There was no promo.
But I mean, you're bringing out the really big guns early. I mean, talking about Thriller. I mean, 70 million albums worldwide sold, greatest selling album of all time.
Greatest selling album of all time.
I mean, I don't know about you or anyone else, but in my opinion, you know, an acetate from Thriller would be the rarest album, the most valuable album in the world.
If there's one Smithsonian record that needs to be, that's the record. It's not, I mean, you could love Mike, hate Mike, love Thriller, hate Thriller. Doesn't really matter. It will never be beat. It will never be topped. That is the biggest selling album in the history of pop music. We could sit here and talk about, oh yeah, I saw a Beatles album sell for $750,000 at the Hermitage. It was a butcher cover sealed. There are tens of thousands of those. Are they hard to get? Absolutely. They're all over the place.
But when you're dealing with the acetates,
you could go get 5 of them. I know somebody who's got 10 right now.
Yeah.
So definitely rare, but not even in the vicinity of a Thriller.
Of an acetate or a test spray.
It's not even in the vicinity. And off the wall, Michael Jackson, another perfect situation.
Well,
arguably, there are people that say, you know, that's more important than Thriller. I mean, I didn't sell as much, but there were documentaries on Off the Wall.
It's an embarrassment of riches in your collection. I mean, mind blown, absolutely mind blown. I had the opportunity to see your collection, and there's just no way to describe it when you're looking at these legendary artists and albums and songs that you have the acetates and test presses for. And,
I'm sorry.
I want to ask you, I mean, we connected because I was hunting test presses of Rapper's Delight, and I found yours. What was it that drew you to acetates and test presses? Because you're in the record business. A lot of guys in the record business collect records, but they're looking for condition. They want a really pristine copy of a first pressing, but you went for the acetates and the test pressings. What was that based on?
So as a child, I was a baseball card collector, and when I was collecting, and obviously I'm a Yankee fan, and you know, so I'm going after all the Yankees, and you know, then I'm being in New York, I'm looking for the Mets, and then obviously you know about in the '70s, you know, everybody loved Rod Carew and Pete Rose and Johnny Bench. So now you're Steve Garvey. So now I'm exploring. Okay, I love the Yankees, but you can't debate, you know, George Brett's George Brett and Steve Garvey and you know Pete Rose. So I was starting to go after all of these things, and when I dug a little deeper, I was like, wow, a rookie card is the value. Like nobody cares about the 1973 Pete Rose record. Pete Rose card. They want that 63. And I'm like, but that's not even like a nice looking card. It's just little 4 guys, little circles with the heads. I'm like, what? But like, oh no, that's the rookie. I'm like, well, what is that? Oh, that's the one. That's the first one. That was, you know, that that major league team said this guy is going to be the guy. Or everybody thinks their guy is going to be the guy. And that's their card saying, we signed this guy. He's going to be the biggest thing. So fast forward, I get into DJing and there were DJs all over the place. It's this big thing. Every block had a bunch of DJs. So I was like, I've always that guy that I always want to be different. And I guess, there is an ego and there is that you just want to set yourself apart from everybody else. I always say, like, I would never want to be Bon Jovi's drummer. I either want to be John Bon Jovi, or I don't want to be in the group. That's just. But there are people that are happy being the drummer, banging all the groupies. I mean, God bless them. But that's just not my thing. So, when it came to with that baseball card mentality, and I'm DJing, and everybody's playing the same records, I said, there's got to be something different. And I found out about promotional copies. So I'd say, oh shit, why is that one white? Like, what's the white label? And people are like, oh yeah, those are really rare. Those only given out to record pools and DJs on radio stations and clubs. I'm like, well, that's what I want. So I start becoming, I'm known as Johnny Promo early on. I go to Vinyl Mania Records. I'd walk in and people were like, oh, Johnny Promo. And I wouldn't buy a record unless he had a promo. Needed the record more than anything. Where's Right on the Rhythm, Mahogany? Here's a stock copy. No, I'm like, you're gonna wait. I'm like, I'll wait till you get like I had to have the promo. So that was it. And as that time went on, I was like, oh wow, these are called test pressings. So it was like literally, it's like a junkie. You start
You
off,
worked your way
all
up.
of a sudden you're shooting heroin into your veins. So you start off with a couple of drinks, and then you just wind up with a syringe. So anyway, when I found out about acetates, I was like, oh, this is it. This is where I'm going. And what happened, the beautiful thing was I'm a music fan first and foremost. So I think that comes across no matter who I meet. I don't care how much success I've had, if I'm in the presence of Narada Michael Walden or anyway, I'm like, wow, I'm a fan, whatever. And one of the things I started doing was as I was meeting these producers, even singers, I got records from Jody Watley. I mean, I would ask them for their records because I was nuts like that. What I did was I would meet these producers and I'd say, hey, if I give you, do you have a test pressing? Like, oh yeah, I have a test pressing and an acetate. I'm like, if I give you two stock copies or like promo copies, would you give me your test and acetate? And they would gladly give them to me because they want stuff with their name on them. And the acetates and test pressing don't have, most of them have no credits. So they were glad to have, they want to have copies for their kids and their family. Look at me, look at my credit. And I was like, I didn't want, I always had the promos as well with the really, but I wanted, so I've been going after these things my whole life. And Charlie Grappone from Vinyl Mania always said, he goes, you're like the only person that had this vision to really, because I was actually on the phone with him last night. We were talking about stuff, and he's like, this is a guy who's seen everybody's collection. I mean, he was affiliated with the Paradise Garage, and I mean everything. And he was like, he's never seen a collection like mine. Like he'll come to my house, he's just like, I can't even believe what you've done. And it was a lot of work. I think one of the most frustrating things that happens to me when I do these podcasts and stuff is people are like, oh, you worked at Atlantic Records for 15 years. Where'd you get all those Led Zeppelins? I'm like, there was just a closet waiting for me. Thousands of people work at this place. Nobody's touching the Led Zeppelin acetate. Let's wait for Johnny D to come. I'm like, I killed myself to get every one of these pieces. There's no, oh wow, so and so has this. There was no closet. I have the closet. There was no closet.
Right. And what tell me if this makes any sense or not, but when I see collectors kind of curate their collections and have the vision, as you put it, to start collecting something that no one else really sees as valuable, not valuable from a monetary standpoint, but valuable from a desirability personally. Yes. I mean, that's incredible that you you were the only guy going after these acetates and test presses for what, 50 years?
well, not fair. I would say it's a good 30 plus years of me going hard with it. One of the other downsides about record collecting, and I'm sure this is the same thing with comics and cards and their posters and everything else, when you become a high profile collector, now people are watching you. So what was happening was I didn't want this to happen, but now people are watching what I'm buying. So now test presses that nobody would regularly care about. Now I go to somebody's house. I'm like, oh wow, you like outbid me on that? And they're like, oh yeah, I have a I'm like, well, you have three in your collection. Like, why would you, all of a sudden, so that happened. Another thing that happened, record collecting, which I thought was horrible, was people looked at me as this guy that had everything, and I didn't, because there were $3 records that I still would buy if I find them. But I've always been about label condition. My labels have to be perfectly clean. I don't want writing, date stamps, sticker residue. My labels have to be clean. And there are certain records, for whatever reason, you just can't find clean labels. So it could be a $4 record, and I'll go to a record show, and some guy knows I'm looking for it, and he's like, yo, I got two of those, give me, and he'll like go for my throat. And I'm like,
That's
I'm not,
right. So you get the Johnny D price on things because they
yeah,
know that
yes. Which is, it's great that there's, even though it's disrespectful, there's a great respect there because they obviously think that I have. But the horrible thing is now I can't just go get a $4 record. I have to have somebody who's, trying to just bend me over. And I'm also a good guy. So I will take care. If you tell me, listen, I collect whatever it is, if I come across things in my, travels, like I'm that guy that would just get it and send it to you. I've always been that guy. And I believe that's why I think I've been blessed to get a lot of things, because I've been a very giving person my whole life. That came from my parents. So I've always come from that. I have a lot of stuff. I don't see myself as a hoarder by any means. If someone comes in, they'll probably have me committed, but it's not hoarding. It's because I do feel like there's a place for things, and I try to. Space is always an issue, obviously, but I am organized, so I try to keep things. But as far as the collecting is concerned, which I think is a funny thing I always say is, most of the time I collect with the records probably every genre with the exception of reggae and heavy metal. I pretty much, I can cover from ABBA to ZZ Top and everything that's kind of in the middle. But there were always pieces to me that are like the Park Place and the Boardwalk. It's like, oh, you got that one, but do you have that? And I think that's like your Christmas wrapping would be the Park Place to the Breaks Boardwalk, as far as I'm concerned. But while we're discussing that, here's my segue. So here is the acetate of the Breaks, Kurtis Blow. Um,
wow.
and if you look, you can see, well, I with all my tests and assays, I repackage them with a new outer and a new inner. But then what I do is I keep the original outer and inner, even if it's messed up, if there's whatever it is, I keep all the original stuff. So this particular one, which is crazy, you brought to my attention that that's Russell Simmons handwriting on the top. There's the Russell Simmons Rush stamp. But this is 2T Scott from one DJ to another. Thanks for all the help in the past. Hope you like the breaks, Kurtis Blow. Also, Kurtis Blow, they put a C. They had to redo it with a K. They were misspelling it. The reason why, I mean, obviously, just the record. It's an iconic record. It's the first major label gold rap record.
Yeah.
And the thing about Kurtis Blow is he was a DJ, and a lot of people don't realize that. And then later on, Run from Run DMC became his DJ. So there's that kind of a cool continuity. But he has that to T Scott, which I was blessed to get a lot of T Scott's collection. T Scott was one of the A-list DJs in New York, along with Larry Levan, Jelly Bean Benitez, Mark Kamen. Like, he was at that level. He passed away. He only remixed about 6 or 7 records, but they were gems. The guy was a quality guy all around. Actually was a very technically great DJ, and most of those guys weren't. From that.
It's interesting. A couple things you said. One is on the Kurtis Blow misspelling with the C. I have a lot of early posters where they make the spelling both ways, so it was a common
Yes,
mistake. And then
yes.
on the Run, I have some early flyers from the New York City Fun House and other places where they bill him as the son of Kurtis
The
Blow.
son of Kurtis Blow, yeah.
Yeah.
But now, yeah, and they even touch on that in Crush Groove. You were the son of Kurtis Blow. Yeah, it was great.
It's so you brought something else up that is really interesting to me, and that's you're a DJ, and you mentioned some of these DJs, New York City DJs. Who would you say are some of the DJs who, not necessarily that you looked up to, but that you consider the most influential guys?
Um, well, I mean, well, as a DJ, I'm very technical. Like, to me, it's about technicality, and we could have 25 podcasts over this particular thing because this becomes an area where, and not that I'm not trying to come off arrogant, but almost every DJ I hear is horrible. And what I mean by that is they don't know what they're doing. Now, yes, can you go DJ a Sweet 16, a bar mitzvah for an anniversary party and play records? Everybody's on a dance floor? Absolutely. But a jukebox can also do that. And there are a lot of DJs who don't understand what DJing is about. DJing isn't just about having people on the dance floor. It's about going seamlessly from one record to another. And that's why there's pitch control on a turntable. So if the record's 122 beats a minute and the record you want to play is 116, you have to then do the adjusting and understand at what point you could do it where you could seamlessly go from here to here. That's the DJ's job. For some reason, most of these people, especially the big name guys that I've been able to listen to, are absolutely horrible. To this day, with all the technology, it went from turntables to computers, laptops, Serato. There are all this trickery that's at people's fingertips, and they still can't do it. It blows my mind. It's not rocket science, but I've been a technical guy my whole life. So, as far as people that influenced me, this guy Leroy Washington was the DJ at Studio 54. He wasn't there for 77 for the first Studio 54, which was the iconic. From 81 to 86, he was there. He was this guy that I would go when I wasn't playing at my clubs at that point. And he was, to me, he had the hardest job as a DJ because in New York, Larry Levan, Paradise Garage was the biggest name, but it was all gay black men. When you hear people talk about it, every white guy, oh yeah, I was there. They weren't there. They're all full of shit. I said they were there. Leroy White, and that's a very I would love to play for black gay men, Puerto Rican, Latin. Those are educated people. Those are great people to play for. They're open. Leroy didn't have that luxury. He had 4,000 white assholes that he had to say, wait a second, I have to break this record right here, but I'm gonna sandwich it between two records they know. That's very hard to do. That's how you break records. And that's what he did. And he was seamless. And you'd go from, this is Studio 54, 4,000 people on a Saturday night. He'll have the Jump Van Halen video on. Then he'll, go into two dance records. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And he'd go from 10 to 8 in the morning. Nobody did that. Today, you go to a function, there's 75 DJs on the bill. He was there all night. And he was immaculate with his records. He used to clean every record. And he also owned a record shop called High Tech in the Village. So you'd go to High Tech and he'd have all these records on the wire, $50, like all these rare, and he would like bring them to studio and play them, which is crazy. So I used to just watch him. My mind was blown. But he was a very big influence for me. And Danny Cole passed away a couple of years ago. We had met years, 1981. We were at a block party at my neighborhood in Brooklyn, and he was dating my friend's sister. My friend was dating his sister. So my friend said, listen, you have to come to the block party. Kathy's brother's going to be playing there. So I go there, and, there were a lot of block parties that I've been to for a couple of years. It was a very, makeshift, like stuff you saw back in the Cool Herc days of people in the park plugging into the lamppost and wires and fans and shit. He had like this sophisticated kind of a thing on top of the stoop with these two turntables I had never seen before, 1100s, which I have 15 of them now, but I was like going crazy over them. And he was seamless, older guy, like perfect, like Guido, perfect hair. Like he was that guy, the cigarette, the Johnny Black, the whole thing. It was the guy. So anyway, that was 81. 82 comes, his sister's having a birthday party in the backyard. And my friend Steven said, listen, I want you to DJ. And I really wasn't doing a lot of parties at the time. I was trying to just get into the club thing. And he said, come there, I'll have the guys bring all your equipment. And I spun. And then Danny came over to me and said, listen, I have this club, Plaza Suite in Brooklyn. I'm there Fridays and Saturdays. If you ever want to come, let me know. And I said, I'm 14 years old. He goes, it's no problem. I'll come pick you up, whatever. So he comes picking me up the next Saturday. He's got his convertible. We get there, do the whole lunch thing. Went to a record pool. Pool for people that they don't know what that is. That's where record companies would send records to. for DJs. So a record pool could have 10, 30, 50, 130 members. These people would go once, twice a week. They'd pick up their records, have to do feedback, send that back to the record company, and in return, the record companies would keep giving them records. That's where a lot of the promos would go. So there were these different pockets of them all over the country. That's how I got to know the whole 50 states from record pools early on, which we also have. I could talk about Def Jam and record pools. I just want to go back to the Danny Cole thing real quick. I know you wanted to say so much. I forget. But so what happened was I go to the club with Danny, and he's like, listen, here's, while I'm spinning, here's the light switch. At the time, the light switch was consisted of a strobe and maybe two lights. I had three switches. So I'm there, we're drinking, hanging out, whatever. So I was like, listen, I'm 14, I'm in this club, it's incredible. This is like the most iconic thing. A couple of weeks into it, he looks at me, it's about 10 to 12, and he said, I'll be back. So I'm like, place is packed, fucking peak dance floor. So, and I'm like, oh, wow, I got to go play. So he put me on. I got to chill even telling the story. So he put me on, he left. So for 2 hours, I got a chance to like prove myself. So I killed the thing for 2 hours. I came back in, I moved back to my little light thing. And for 4 years, we back and forth Fridays and Saturdays, and we had a great time. If I wasn't there, I was at Studio 54. So those two people were very, very influential to get back to. Sorry, I was so...
No, it's great.
long.
Hey, Johnny, this has been a great first episode. I mean, the thing about you is that you have so many stories and experiences and hopefully we're going to get to them all. But
Yes.
Thanks very much for coming on this first one
Thank
together.
you, man. I'm very
and,
excited. I'm looking forward to these.
It's going to be great, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, thanks.